welcome to the Logistics Point interview. So I'm Nick Bugil, and today I'm joined by Martin Cooper, who is the Vice President in the Project Management team in Prologis UK. And today we are talking about net zero and logistics developments. Martin, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for the invite, Nikolai. It's a delight to talk to you today.
And I think that when we're talking about net zero, there's so many things that people look at net zero. So how should we define net zero specifically in logistics and property?
That's a good question, and you're absolutely right. In order to create net zero carbon buildings, it's first important to reduce the carbon associated with that building through its product and construction stages, either through careful specification and selection of products and components or other measures. And until recently, there wasn't clear guidance on how to measure that. But in 2019, the UK Green Building Council published a net zero carbon buildings framework, which clearly sets out how to go about doing that. And they've got two definitions, which are common to other frameworks around the world. So a net zero carbon in construction building has the amount of carbon emissions that are locked up in that product and construction stage as being zero or negative. And that is generally achieved and recognized as being achieved through offsetting. So, through establishing what your embodied carbon is and then offsetting that through the purchase of carbon credits, or in the case of Prologis, mitigating that through rainforest protection, which is another way of doing it. To say that a building is net zero carbon with operational energy goes a step further and then looks at the energy that it's consumed and used to operate that building. And again, the UK GBC give a definition of that. And in order to meet that framework, you actually need to monitor the energy used and ensure that year on year you are having a building that's net consumption is zero or negative. For example, it may return energy back to the grid.
And when we are talking about logistics and building things, it's always about costs. So the first will be, is it more expensive to be net zero than the more traditional way of building?
That's an interesting question. Probably one that I can answer easily from Prologis's perspective, and maybe less so from others. We've been on a journey for over a decade now where we've been looking at streamlining our specification to reduce the embodied carbon. And then we've had a partnership with the Planet Mark and Cool Earth where we've mitigated that embodied carbon. So actually our buildings deliver net zero carbon in construction for free. It's part of our base specification, part of our market leading position. But having said that, the framework that the UK GBC have put in place is encouraging others to follow this route as well, and sort of giving you a shorter answer. It shouldn't cost too much more money because there are frameworks in place to measure it. And there are ways to mitigate the embodied carbon or to offset it through the purchase of carbon credits.
And I can imagine that not only in the UK, but pretty much everywhere, we have these buildings that some of them are pretty old, some of them might not necessarily be net zero. Can this be retrofitted in some way, or should we just demolish what is there and start from ground zero?
So following the the approach of using what you've got for as long as you possibly can and building longevity into buildings. If a building has a useful life, no, absolutely not. We shouldn't demolish it because although many buildings components can be recycled and reused, that in itself is going to use carbon. But there are opportunities, and so Prologis works with our customers in some of our older buildings, for example, to retrofit LED lighting into the warehouses, and that is a great win for everybody there because it's less energy consumed to light the warehouses, and increasingly you can look at the installation of rooftop solar. Subject to checking that the roof will take it, but generally it does work with industrial buildings. Again, to help customers either to reduce the operational energy that they consume, or even to take that to net zero. It's perhaps more of a challenge on an existing building to take it to net zero because you've got to put your panels around existing utilities and services hanging from the roof and things like that. But there are ways that you can do that, and that's just a couple of examples there.
And what is the role of investors in all of that? And do you think that somehow, you said it's been a journey for the last 10 years, do you think that investors have also seen this as a journey and have changed their ways?
Absolutely. And Prologis has long recognized that leadership in sort of ESG, environmental and social governance, creates value for our business, but also for our investors. Increasingly, consumer investors like you and me, who want to invest on the stock market, and corporate investors are looking for sustainable and green credentials and certified green credentials to invest in. And the push from investors for that has led to ESG related financing, such as green bonds, which companies such as Prologis are then able to use to finance green construction, but also sustainability linked loans, which have perhaps a reduced cost on capital, reduced lending rate. So the role of ethical investors and investors in general is absolutely driving sustainability, and is right now is a real force for good.
And the other important factor will also be governments. And as you mentioned that the UK has now, we have a standard for net zero buildings. And what is the role of governments, do you think, there? And do we need more support, financial or legal support for it?
Yes, so I think as we know, governments around the world signed up to limit global temperatures increases to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial times in the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. However, I think their progress is well documented on blogs like this and in the press and in specialist press, and I'm not going to comment on that. But in the lead up to COP26, I think further leadership from governments, government and governments, is absolutely needed. One area of success in recent years has been the decarbonisation of the national grid here in the UK. So renewable energy, reducing the carbon emissions involved in creating the electricity that we all need. And that is actually recognised in the draft building regulations, in the carbon factors that are attributed to electricity, so much so that it's just as efficient as gas now. But that's still in draft, and it's been in draft for some considerable time. And I think a real positive step could be to actually bring those building regulations into place as soon as possible, so that businesses like Prologis and other developers can take advantage of that and it will help with our journey towards electrification of buildings and reduction of measured carbon emissions. There are elements of that happening already. So the local enterprise partnerships and the investment side are running workshops and running things to encourage businesses of all sizes who are interested in reducing their carbon, the journey to net zero. And I think more of the same is a really positive step. Currently, I'm not sure if you're aware, but currently the Planet Mark are touring the UK in an electric bus, in their zero carbon battle bus, and Prologis has sponsored that tour because of our partnership with them, but because also we believe that going to lots of different locations and running net zero carbon workshops is a brilliant way to help small and medium enterprises, and businesses who may just be starting on their journey towards net zero, to share some of our experience, but share some of the experience that the Planet Mark get as well. And as I said at the beginning, that's being enabled by the local environment, the LEPs and other local governments.
And when we're talking again about the journey and the journey of Prologis, what are your plans when it comes to net zero and property, and what is happening at the moment with Prologis?
Prologis, we've been working hard now for over 12 years to make our buildings as sustainable as possible. In large part, that comes out of our partnership with the Planet Mark, which is a certification scheme where you measure the life cycle carbon within the building. So you reduce through the specification, and we measure the carbon that's there, and then we mitigate that carbon through a partnership with a charity called Cool Earth. And the mitigation protects rainforest, so it's actual physical protection. But our approach to net zero has got three strands. The first being environmental certification, the second being operational energy, and the third being operational carbon and mitigation, as I said. So what we do is every new building globally, it undergoes some form of environmental certification. So here in the UK, we use BREEAM, and we regularly engage with the BRE who run that program to provide feedback on how the different assessment methods work for us. We're a big user and promoter of BREEAM, and we find it adds value. We talked about investors. So investors increasingly are looking for BREEAM certification and are delighted when you then deliver BREEAM Excellent or even BREEAM Outstanding. We focus on operational energy, and basically our warehouse is designed to minimize the energy needed to light them and to heat them. You can see behind me as my my backdrop a building that we've worked with a customer, Cummins, at Apex Park in Daventry, and there we've got LED lighting throughout and lots of natural lighting through roof lights. But by working with them to also look at operational energy and install a fairly sizable rooftop solar array, this is, we've achieved what we think is the first UK building of its kind to be both net zero carbon in construction, but also in operation. So the EPC rating of this building is A+ -3. So it actually returns energy back to the grid each year. And as I mentioned before, our approach to life cycle assessment of carbon And measuring the embodied carbon in construction means that every building that we've built is net zero carbon in construction as standard. Say for free, but it is part of our base specification. But we've got that knowledge and ability to work with customers and help them on their ESG journey, their ESG goals. And if they want to look at a truly net zero carbon building in operation as well, like we have done here, we're able to engineer that into the process.
For everyone who would like to learn more, you can find more in the description below.